Hi guys, it's Keenan with Loco Blade Works. The purpose of this video is going to be to kind of detail the last year of development with what I've done over the last year and how I've ended up at the point I'm at now. About a year ago, I believe sometime back in late June, I went ahead and started this business. I filed paperwork for my LLC, downloaded some CAD softwares, namely Fusion 360 to be specific, and I used some online resources to start teaching myself how to use CAD software. And I used mainly, what I used to get started was the Titans of CNC's online academy. And they had some fantastic videos to kind of get me started with getting familiar with the CAD side of Fusion. And I used that as a basis and then used other videos from YouTube on specific things that I needed to learn how to do with the software. I learned how to model a knife in about 30 different ways in a relatively short period of time. And I started getting things that worked out pretty well. I made quite a number of designs, and by the first of the year, I had sort of a library of fixed blade and folding knives that I was ready to show the world, things that I was going to attempt to get somebody to make for me. You know, one thing led to another. Started with one big beefy folder, which is something I typically like to carry. And I took a bunch of 3D printed plastic knives with me to Blade Show, Texas in February. And at the show, I talked to everybody that I could possibly talk to about this. I showed my knives to everybody that was willing to look at and talk about my knives. I went to everybody's table I could find. I talked to makers, I talked to retailers, and I even talked to some custom makers. Got a lot of advice from a lot of people. The guys from Big Idea Design had some great input. Some of the manufacturers had great input. I talked to Reich, I talked to Riyadh, I talked to Best Tech, I talked to everybody there that I could talk to. And I came away from the show with a stack of business cards and a lot of email contacts and a lot of feedback on what I brought with me. Oh, and of course I had to get me a show exclusive while I was there. But when I got back home, I really sat down and I started working on something different, right? The feedback that I got from the show was extremely valuable. And talked about everything from handle shape to lock bar geometry to the style and type of the pocket clip. And I sat down and just totally started from scratch, right? Trying to keep my same sense of style, the same things that I wanted to see aesthetically in the project, with a lot of influence from people who have been doing this for a long time. And by far, I think the most influential person that I talked to at Blade Show, Texas was Todd Begg, who I probably spent maybe 30 minutes talking to at the show, and that was it. But it was enough to get me some fantastic feedback on the shape of the handle, the lock bar geometry, the style of the blade, just all sorts of things that we talked about in a very short period of time. And so I developed the initial design for what will be known as the laser duck. And continued to go through the process. Once I had the basic idea of a knife that I'm pretty proud of, I shot emails to every single manufacturer that I talked to. I talked to Artisan Cutlery. I sent them emails. I talked to Reich. I talked to Riot. I talked to Concept. And all of them had different answers. They had different minimum quantities they wanted for my first order. They had different pricing. They had different options available for materials, for finishing, for all those sorts of things. And the one company that impressed me the most by far was Bestech. Bestech emailed me back immediately, got me information on quantity, on pricing, on packaging, on everything that I needed. Every question that I had, they answered, and they answered it quickly and professionally. Whereas there are some manufacturers that I emailed that I never heard back from at all. And some of them I heard back from and had outrageous pricing on prototyping and outrageous pricing on each individual piece, and even more outrageous order quantities. I had one of those companies email me back and tell me that their minimum order quantity would be 800 knives. Now, I don't know about any of you out there, but I'm not in a position to foot that bill. So, after talking with Bestech and sending them the files that I had drawn up in CAD, I decided to go ahead and move forward with them with the prototyping process, where I developed my first real prototype. And I didn't have that prototype by the middle of this year, but I decided that it would be worth my time after the success I had at Blade Show, Texas, to go ahead and go to the biggest Blade Show in Atlanta. And I had a blast. I got to meet so many people at Atlanta. I talked to Kevin Toole with got some designs that he's working with Reich. I talked with the guys from Arcane, from Tactile Turn, from Big Idea Design. Talked to the guys from Original Goat, who are making scales and other things. But whatever the case, I came away from Blade Show Atlanta, walking around with my little plastic knives, which I got mostly positive feedback on. And again, a stack of people that were interested in what I was doing and willing to help once I got a little bit further along. And so that brings me to where we're at today, right? I currently have my first functional prototype, and I am currently working on revisions to that and changes that I want to make, and trying to get that finished up so I can get in touch with Bestech for a second run of prototypes. I've made quite a number of changes to sort of the dimensions and the overall lines and flow of the design. And Bestech has been very accommodating with those changes along the way. I will not be going to Blade Show West here in about a month, but I will be at Blade Show Texas at the beginning of next year. And I will have, more than likely, a couple of functional prototypes at the show. I've currently got some other ideas that I am working on. things like pry bars, things like knuckles, possibly even some flashlights, and I hope at some point some watches, because that's another addiction of mine. And I'm going to continue to try to develop products where and when I can. I will probably, sometime before the end of this year, end up launching a few pocket pry bars available for people to buy, so that I can start getting a name out there in some other way. And I hope that through this process, even though it is difficult right now, not only will it help me to grow in this aspect, but I hope that this serves as at least some inspiration to other people who have ideas, who have things that they want to pursue. And even though it may be difficult at times, if you have something you really want to do, there is no reason to delay that to someday, right? I did that for a long time. I'm sitting at a point now where the current social censorship on meta platforms is making it very difficult for me to grow any following on their platforms. Instagram has outright decided that they just don't like knives. In fact, the first pictures I ever posted on my page were of little plastic prototypes that were obviously plastic. And those were immediately flagged. And my account essentially shadow banned immediately. And I've fought with that for about the past, 8 months or so, trying to grow a following as much as I can on those platforms. And finally came to the conclusion that until, for some reason, Instagram decides to change their policies on those things, it's not a viable option for me to grow any sort of following for this business. I put off starting this brand, starting this company for a long time. And had I started this several years ago, I probably would have had a much easier time growing this than what I have. So don't be afraid to jump off in the deep end. Don't be afraid to go after your dreams. You never know what might happen. And even though this is harder now than what it would have been had I started sooner, I'm still glad I started this. And I still am fully committed, and I fully expect to see this dream become a reality in the very near future. But that's all for today. Thanks for joining me. And if you are interested to see how this continues to develop over time, then please follow the channel, subscribe, and come with me for this journey.